long time ago. Actually, when we first came to Costa Rica, there was no electricity in that whole area. There was no tourism, there was no ferry, there was no road, no bridges, no electricity, no phone. And so we've seen a lot of things change. And actually, at that time, I'm a physicist, we started installing solar and realized that what the world really needed was the electronics to convert the solar from, like, DC solar energy into AC so it was usable. And one thing led to another. We actually ended up creating the world's turbine market. And the companies that we began at the time, Hard Interface and then Trace, they're now owned by Schneider Electric. And when we did that, of course, it was an exciting new time, you know, that we thought solar was so cool. And we all dreamed that one day we would pass what they called grid parity. One day solar would become cheap enough, or the grid would become expensive, where it was cheaper to buy solar panels and put them on your home than it was to pay your electric bill. And so part of the pursuit of doing that was we, did all kinds of experiments and made all kinds of new things, and we made the very first grid-tie inverters. So you could actually take the solar panels and put that energy into the grid without batteries or anything. And it was a really cool experiment and a really cool demonstration. But it had a very important footnote. It only could work by theory as long as the amount of solar you're putting in was insignificant. And so, and we actually started it. And so now lots of companies did it, and lots of countries got behind it. Germany came on strong, but actually lots of countries came on strong, lots of states in the United States, to where people passed laws and benefits, and they had incentive programs, and all these things encouraged people to do solar, and they forgot to read the fine print, that it only works as long as it's insignificant. And so now, in many areas, it's no longer insignificant. In Germany, a very large part of Europe, Japan, Hawaii, California, it's way beyond significant, and now they're realizing, hey, wait a second, this doesn't work. And so they're having to try to realize another approach. We realized it from the beginning. We thought it was an interesting demonstration, an interesting experiment. We didn't realize the world was going to massively install these things. But there's some really good things that have happened. They've driven the price of solar panels down because of mass production, and so it really served that purpose. And so now we have passed grid parity in many parts of the world, including here. Right now, today, it is cheaper to buy solar than it is to pay e-save. It's just taking a while for people to realize that. It's also true in Hawaii. It's true in Jamaica. It's true in the whole Caribbean. It's true of most of Central and South America. And almost all of the developing world. And so this is an exciting time, but people have to realize it doesn't apply if you put in grid-tie solar. That's the cheapest way to install solar. The problem is, it doesn't solve the problem. This is a big issue about how to deal with this. And so we have created a new product that takes it many levels up, that integrates all of this stuff and doesn't create problems. When you have solar, it can come and go within seconds. As a cloud can blow over. And same with wind. It's the same issue. The wind can start, the wind can stop. And when that happens, and it's a very small thing, the grid just takes it in stride. But if it's a very large thing, it makes the grid unstable. And so the grid company, like you say in this country, has to install very expensive, very polluting peaker plants. For instance, in Galavito, I'll show you a picture of it later, in Punta Arenas, kind of by Miramar, they installed an enormous 200 megawatt peaker plant that runs on bunker oil, the dirtiest type of petroleum that they have to import in the country. In fact, it's so dirty they can't run it through the pipeline. And that's because of all the renewable energy they're putting in. So we need to come up with a solution that really works. And so the idea is that we come up with a solution that has a benefit and a value to people's lives today, but it's also the same solution that will get us to where we're going.
I have a question. So do you guys know why they do peaker plants? Did you get that? Do you understand why they do peaker plants? Because, okay, so it's an important point. The reason they do peaker plants is because if you have this, because coal and nuclear energy and burning coal and oil takes a long time to start up, but it's super steady, okay? When you have sun and wind, he said it's intermittent. It comes and goes, but the grid will only deal with super steady. So they start a big generator plant burning oil, so when the sun dips, they put in more. They keep it super steady with the generator. So all solar and wind, all over the world that's going in right now, has somewhere a big plant that they're burning to stabilize, right? To stabilize the energy. So if the wind drops down, they put in more. The sun comes back, they cut back. It's their lever to make this grid stable, because the grid only runs under a super stable condition.
Right.
That's why they do the peaker plants.
Okay.
I can send you lots of links about all these reports and people that are making a fuss out of this. Just recently, all of the grid companies of Europe got together for a big meeting, and over half of them proposed that they stop accepting new renewable energy altogether in Europe because of this issue. Right today, they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars in Germany replacing all the inverters because of this very issue. This is a very big thing, big deal in Hawaii. Because Hawaii's electricity is about 45 cents a kilowatt hour. Costa Rica, it's about 32 cents a kilowatt hour. Anytime it's over 30 cents a kilowatt hour, it's cheaper to buy solar than grid. But because of this problem, in Hawaii, they won't let you connect to the solar unless they do a special study on your area. So it's a real big issue. In fact, the Helco, which is the big grid company on the big island called Hawaii, they're buying one of our products right now just to control the solar that's already installed. So I'll kind of go over this. You know, we can go in more detail if you want to later. Just stop me and ask questions if you're not understanding this. But this is just a basic thing. All of the electrical things that you know about are in one of these four groups. You know about the public power grid. You know about different loads. You've got storage like batteries, right? And other sources like solar and wind. The issue is, for our world to exist, they need all this stuff. And this stuff is hooked up like this. And the red arrows are how the energy is moving around, and the blue arrows are how the information about the energy is moving around. And it looks like a big confusing mess. Because it is. You know, it wasn't designed all in one day. It's like slowly evolved, and they just kind of patched this together. So when you try to improve the infrastructure, you try to create the smart grid, you have to deal with this mess. So what we've done is we've created a universal power inverter, universal power interface. It's called a transverter. It's the same thing as your switch or your network hub in your office. You know, all the computers connect to it and they can share information. This is the energy equivalent. All the things connect to it of all these four groups, and they can share energy. Now, of course, it has to convert things. It has to change voltages, change things from AC to DC or DC to AC, but it does all that. And it also creates all the information needed to analyze this stuff. And this can be scalable. This can be a small thing. It could be one of these neighborhoods here. It could be one house. It could be the whole community of Nosara. It could be the whole country of Costa Rica. And it doesn't have to happen all at once. So you can start with small things and they can connect together. I can go over some of this kind of quickly. Basically, it can take the DC from a battery, for instance, and go into the home. But at the same time, it can inject the solar or residential size wind or things like that right into the home. And then it can connect to the grid and this can become a UPS system. So I don't know how many of you have experience with uninterruptible power supplies. But basically all data centers, all that bank right there, most professional offices have UPS systems. So if the grid goes down, their computers would just turn off immediately. They can at least run for a little while they shut them down and save their files and stuff. But most of the critical operations, they have a generator also, so they can just keep operating. This is a very large market. It's actually, the UPS market is quite a bit larger than the solar market. So this is designed so that it is a UPS system, but it's a UPS system that can integrate solar energy. So it becomes a much more useful UPS.
So if your power clicks out, it doesn't just hold you, it continues to charge, and you could run indefinitely, endlessly. You'd be limited, but every day it would charge and you could continue to use it. There wouldn't be a time it would run out.
Now here's a key issue that's in here, is it has automatic surge assist. What that means is we have loads that take a lot of energy to start, but not nearly as much to run. That's all inductive motors. That's all air conditioning, refrigeration, pumps, escalators, elevators, big industrial equipment, all that stuff run on inductive motors. They take 3 or 4 times more power to start than they do to run. Which means that when you build infrastructure, whether it's for one of those neighborhoods and you're putting the wires and the transformers in, or whether it's this building, or maybe it's some large building in New York City or something, someone had to get an electrical engineer to design the system, of course. And how did they do that? They did that by calculating the surge required to start all those inductive motors. That's how they decide how big a wires to put in and how big a transformers. So if you are making this neighborhood, someone is going to design the system, and that's going to be a considerable cost for that neighborhood for the infrastructure. So in our case, since we already have batteries, we already have solar, when you start the big loads, it automatically gives a short-term energy loan out of the battery bank. It's usually only for a few seconds, so it's really a fairly negligible amount of the energy stored in the battery. It's just you need that several second loan, basically. It's like a bridge loan, some sort of financial thing. You just need a loan. You really need it. It's important, but you only need it for a couple of days, right? So what that does is it can cut the cost of the infrastructure in half. For instance, if you were going to build out one of these neighborhoods and you said, okay, we're going to design it in for 100 amp service in every home. With this system, with no perceivable difference to living in that house, you could reduce it to 50 amps. That means all your transformers, all your wires, your cables, even the wiring within the home, or within the building, or within a skyscraper can be reduced. Particularly in areas that are creating new infrastructure, like for the first time, that's a big number. Basically, cutting the cost of something in half is significant. When you go to develop a new neighborhood, making the infrastructure is like if you do that before you start making the neighborhood, that's a big expense.
And people in these homes can't tell. They won't be able to tell that it's reduced. It just doesn't allow everything to turn on at the same time. If you're running your dryer, your wash machine, your refrigerator won't automatically cycle until your dryer's off. It just makes things take turns. It's like in your home, you don't know when your refrigerator turns on and off. It just cycles through the day. And it just makes sure everything takes turns, so you don't need such a big infrastructure to do everything at once. That's what.
And the thing is made so it's very communicative. What that allows it to do is coordinate with other units across the street, across the town, or across the whole country, so that you can coordinate things and further smooth things out. The whole idea is instead of having solar be so trendy and green and cool and cute, but creating lots of problems behind the scenes, we're actually making it really solve the problems. We're making it so that it really actually massively increases the profitability of the grid company, doesn't create problems, it actually solves their existing problems. So it's a big picture thing, and it's something that's very important. The key issue is to make it so it also has a financial impact that's immediate, so that the people have a real value proposition from day one. I'm going to skip through this one, but we can come back to it if people want to.
Shows how energy moves. The thing is, when we started this project, when we started the first inverter company and started with solar happening, right? We realized that it would be insignificant, that that's how it would always be used. But then when it started to get to be significant, that was like 15 years ago, we started on this new project so that we could help solar become the dominant energy force on the planet, or wind, or hydro. We could bring it to this point. 5 years ago, we spoke in Germany, and Hart said, you're headed in the wrong way. You're going to have to look at this small rooftop stuff, not these big fields of solar panels, because you're not going to be able to control it. Well, 5 years ago, now they're saying, well, you're right. What are we going to do? Because they have all this rooftop solar, and it's making the whole grid unstable. So they've come up with a new idea. It's called smart grid. And they said, okay, we're going to put the smart grid in with energy storage, and that will allow us to bring in alternative energy. So it's kind of another circle, and what they're realizing is that the smart grid in a box is what we have. And we can do it one house at a time, which gives you redundancy, which gives you stability, and which makes everything cheap and in seconds, rather than big and massive, right? So what we're going to talk about is that they've decided now, all over the world, to do a smart grid. And what we are proposing is that we've already done the smart grid, but it's all in one box, because it runs every direction.
In fact, here's just to give you an idea how what they look like, just the physical reality of it. This is a power module. Actually, we just installed the system just a little ways past the gas station today. And 16 solar panels. It has actually this whole same setup. That's what's inside. It's made for very highly automated mass production. We have our own factory. We manufacture, we design everything. The factory is in Zona Franca Metropolitana. It's about halfway between the airport of San Jose and San Jose. It's in a free trade zone. We're a Hart Transverter SA. It's a society anonyme, which probably you guys all know what those are, right? The Costa Rica Corporation, and we're a Zona Franca. We're a free zone company, so everything comes and goes duty-free from our company. We're guaranteed duty-free access to the United States and Canada and most of Latin America. This equipment that we have set up right now is probably capable of supporting about $15 million a year of sales. And then within our current factory, if we expand with some more capital equipment, it would take us up to about $50 million a year sales, and then from that point we either expand other buildings, or maybe in Costa Rica, or maybe other buildings in other countries. A lot of countries are wanting this kind of stuff, and everybody wants green jobs and all that, so some of them will actually try to sweeten up the deal by providing all kinds of benefits and maybe capital for the factory. We have very strong patents in the United States and Europe. I can come back to this later if some people want to get more technical about it, but this is actually a drawing from the patent documents. The main thing is it's made modular. So this is a 2,000 watt power module, but you can hook a bunch of them together for more power. And each power module has more things connected to it, and each thing is individually controlled. Each solar array, each battery bank. So it really gives you the tools required to make the systems that they need. We also really go overboard. The logic that we use, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with the terms microcontroller or microprocessor. Everybody has smartphones and TVs and computers and all kinds of stuff. And even your air conditioner and your washing machines, a lot of them have microcontrollers in them now. There's large as a microcontroller in it. Those things have an inherent limitation is because they share resources. And so when you have something as critical as the running the power, particularly if it starts to be the dominant force running power in the world, you can't risk having something crash or having something have a hiccup. You know, your iPhone has to get turned off and turned on again. It's not the end of the world. You know, you can handle that. But if you have, you know, Trenton, New Jersey turning off and turning on again, it's a little bit more complex. So the idea is we don't do it that way. We use field programmable gate arrays, which is a very state-of-the-art thing, and we have literally 100 times more logic in it, but that can go super fast. And so the things we can do are things that you're not used to seeing. For instance, we include in this basic device a 16-channel color digital oscilloscope. You just simply plug your computer into the USB port and you've got that. You've got catalogs, you've got logic analyzer, you've got every piece of techno equipment that anyone would want is included. That we do it as a benefit because it allows us to do all this fancy stuff behind the scene, but it also allows everyone to participate. The idea behind a product is to make something that's useful, that gives you some financial return, helps your life, but it also helps the world solve problems. But that's all the stuff it does today. It's also supposed to turn the whole world into a laboratory so that we can have more cooperation with developing new equipment, new solutions. So that's a very big deal. I know it sounds a little complex, and it is, because no one's done things like this before, but it is the way that we can solve the issues of the planet. I mean, you guys have all read this ecology stuff and carbon, you know, carbon issues and global warming and all that stuff. Actually, if you delve into it from a physics standpoint, it's actually much more serious than any of the articles let on. We really do have to come up with solutions. And so the idea is to expand the resources so that more people can participate in coming up with
and
solutions.
Because we look at things so fast and in this kind of depth, it means that now when we're pushing solar into different areas, the utilities aren't going, oh my God, we don't want these guys. They're going, oh my, look at this. Now we can really see what's happening. Oh, we can really use this. Well, we can really be quick. What they do now, if there's a power problem, they wait for somebody to call in and say, hey, our power's out on our block, right? This way they would know instantly. Over the internet, they could check it out and know why it's gone out. So they're looking to have our stuff in. They've been fighting solar and alternative energy because it's too hard to control, but with this kind of diagnostics, and they can look right in real quick from their home office. If you have a problem, Hart's on the other side of the world, you can plug it in and he can look at your system in your home and fix it or help you decide about it, right? Well, that's what the utilities need to be able to really integrate solar. That's what's been holding it back.
And a lot of those companies are very excited about it, like San Diego Gas and Electric, Southern California Edison, Helco in Hawaii, but also like EPM in Colombia. Now, that's an interesting company. That's the largest grid company in the country of Colombia. They have 6 million customers. They have about $12 billion a year of revenue. And they live in a country where 58% of the people do not have electricity. So what are they going to do? So they realize that now it's cheaper to put solar in small individual, what they call microgrids, in these little communities, rather than string lines in and actually run the grid to those countries. And so they're very interested. They're actually considering investing directly in our company. And this is that's a catalog. You can actually see, this is the kind of stuff it puts out. You don't have to look at this stuff to use it, but then again, all that kind of detail is there. And that detail is there for the grid company. Awesome. The smart grid idea was come up with by the grid companies, and since they're used to being at the top of the food chain, basically. They're the top, they make all the electricity and they give it out to everyone. That's the way they envisioned this. You've got to realize that when they first made the grid company, the dominant forms of making electricity were coal-fired plants. Eventually they had nuclear. Those things have a tremendous advantage to scale. I could literally make a coal-fired plant small enough to just run this office, but it'd be incredibly inefficient. So they made those things very big, but the only problem was to get electricity to everybody's house, they had to make a grid. That's the most expensive, complicated thing that our civilization has ever made, is the grid. But things have changed. Now, we're running out of coal. We're running out of the Earth's ability to absorb the ecological effects of burning coal. And nuclear has an even worse problem. So the whole idea is there's other technologies. There's solar, and solar's coming on strong. There's wind. Those things are intermittent, so you have to have energy storage. Now the thing about solar and energy storage is that no one ever is going to design a solar cell or a battery cell that puts out more than a couple volts. Meaning that those technologies are inherently small. You can make big systems. I could have 10 acres of solar panels, and it's a big system, but only because I put all these little teeny things together. Meaning there's no longer a pressure to do big centralized energy production, which is required the grid, which means the function of the grid is going to change. And it takes a while. There's a lot of inertia in the society. A lot of people, it takes them a while to figure this out and to get comfortable with it, but it absolutely will change. There's lots of articles, Bloomberg, a whole bunch of things. A lot of the but the biggest energy producer company, NRG in the United States, basically is forecasting that the grid companies will become a thing of the past. And so the idea is to make technology that transitions us from where we are today to where we know we're going to in the future. So we envision the smart grid being an entirely different thing. Rather than being relegated and all controlled from the grid, it's controlled locally in each home, that they have the capability to cooperate with each other. This is the basic home that we put a system in today. You have two power modules that are 2,000 watts each. And then they have critical loads that they can provide. So we wire the home. That's your refrigerator, your lights, your electronics, things like that. But then you have, and you also have battery banks. In this case, we have 2 battery banks and 2 solar panels. In this case, it's twice as much solar and twice as much battery for the house we put in today. But the same idea. But then the key thing is we have this box right here, which is a T13X. It's an automatic demand response. So these are your large non-critical loads. Your air conditioner, your electric vehicle charger. They actually have an electric vehicle.
Clothes dryer.
Maybe a freezer, well pump.
Clothes dryer.
Clothes dryer. That's actually there. And the bigger things, it could be a heat pump or commercial electric heat. We're going to worry about that here, but I mean, a lot of parts of the world, heating is a very big issue. Hot water heating. So now we look at the typical U.S. home. And of course the homes here, a lot of them are kind of like that because it's U.S. people that have come here to live. They have an average load of 1.7 kilowatts. That's not so much. This has 4 kilowatts of power modules. The house we put in, installed today, has 4 kilowatts of solar panels. But they have a 100 amp service. Well, 100 amp service is 24 kilowatts. There's obviously a really big difference between 1.7 and 24. So why do they need this 24 kilowatt service? And this is typical. I'm sure the homes that you're involved in your real estate development manager, do you have 100 amp service on them? Or,
I think
right?
so, yeah.
Yeah, you probably do. That's what you want. But for instance, Blue Spirit, in their development, ESA refuses to allow them to have 100 amp service or to have more than a certain number of homes. In other words, it's limiting the size of their project because of the 100 amp service. But the only reason you need a 100 amp service, if you're only averaging 1.7, is that things come on randomly. They could all come on at once. So we do like I was saying, we force them to take turns. And we do it because in real time, we're monitoring within a small fraction of a second. We can sense what's happening and disconnect things. In other words, there's actually relays in this thing that can disconnect your air conditioner and then reconnect it later. But make sure that it doesn't run while your clothes dryer's running. You can make it go off and on. So that's a major effort. Now, what are the benefits they get out of this? All this solar energy can go back into the grid or can go into their local loads. But then on top of it, when the grid comes down, when the grid's not working, their critical loads always work. And most of the systems that we recommend have enough solar and enough batteries where they can literally run forever. So you've got, and a system like this, for the size that's right here, that's only like it's not so much money. Now in the United States, it's a little bit more here with insulation, but still $12,000. So, if you have a $240,000 home, that's only 5% of the cost of the home. The electrical system is what makes the home work. Within a couple of years, they'll pay for this just with the savings from their electric bill. And of course, I'm sure you don't think $240,000 is one of your more expensive homes here. So the whole idea is people put a lot of money into their home. The whole production of it, and they want it to work. They want it to work for convenience and for comfort, but they also want to work for security. If you have a security system in your home, of course, it needs electricity to work. So the whole idea is you integrate it right into the home, right from the beginning. Now this, if you put it in 100 and a half, not only does it give these benefits to the homeowner, they also have something that they can understand, they can be proud of, right? They have green energy, and it isn't just green energy that works when EC works, it's green energy that works when EC doesn't work. If they feel like it, they can throw the switch and disconnect from EC and still have a pretty good life. They won't have air conditioning, they won't have a clothes dryer, but they will have their lights and their refrigerator, and their electronics, and their music, and fans, it's their washing machine. It's not so bad a life, right? And it's this compromise, this middle ground that allows us to provide enough value to the individual homeowners that they'll do it. And it'll be a good deal for them, but it also paves the way to change the world. This is infinitely scalable. Grid-tie solar is not. As soon as they go past 15%, it makes the grid unstable, and the grid immediately has to spend enormous amounts of money to deal with that. It's already starting to happen even in this country. So the whole idea is this is something that's good for everybody. It can progress into the future and solve these problems, but also provide strong benefit to the home. And if you have areas, there's hurricanes or big storms, and we're talking worldwide, there's all kinds of things that happen. I mean, today in the United States, they're simulating a terrorist attack on the United States that would disrupt the whole grid. They're simulating a nationwide grid failure today and tomorrow in the United States.
That's scary.
The army and
think how much that would screw up things.
So what would this give you, right? If you had this in your home, you paid $12,000, you have some panels. So in your home, your electricity every day, it would go on as normal. The sun that you would be collecting, you'd use in your home first. Okay? If you use more than that, you're hooked to the grid, you just see that on your bill. Okay? If you didn't use that much, then you are away for the weekend, okay? It'll go back in and you'll get paid for that, right? But then they have all kinds of other things that the government will pay you for, that this will meter and monitor so that you can make financial, so you can gain on it. Like it'll help control the instability on the grid. Well, in New York City, the grid will pay for that. It'll help do power factor compensation, so because of all the incandescent light bulbs, it'll pay for that, right? And so it allows you to use the sun. If you decide you never want to pay electric bill again, you can live underneath your solar, or you could add to it. Or you could just have it there doing your part, and you could do less solar but still buy some. But if the power went down for any reason, you would indefinitely have some power that would keep your gate locked, or would keep your lights on, or would keep your refrigerator on, or just minimal things, but indefinitely.
But still keep your phone working, your computer's working.
You can charge your stuff, your blender.
Right.
You got a fan.
What's the lifespan of the system?
The solar panels are guaranteed for 25 years.
Okay.
And this isn't just one brand, this is kind of an industry thing. And here's the deal, is electronics typically haven't, people are used to throwing these things away every few years and getting a new one. So the idea, the goal of our company is to make electronics that can last that long. And there's very few companies that really go to that part. Our products have nothing that can corrode. It's all powder-coated aluminum cases. There's no steel. It's all stainless steel fasteners. All of the circuit boards are conformal coated. And the company that I used to start the inverter business, Hard Interface, we made products with those construction techniques. I was recently at some cell tower sites in California for AT&T, and we were talking about powering the cell towers with transverters, and they were excited. And they asked about how long is this stuff going to last, and they said, if you can make it last as long as that thing, we're interested. And they pointed on the wall, and it was one of our Hard Interface inverters that had been serviced for 25 years. And it turns out there's over 1,000 AT&T cell towers that have those in them that are all working after 25 years. It's the only piece of equipment in the entire AT&T organization that's lasted that long. And so
we're hoping for
it's possible. So but not only that, our stuff, why am I going to want to throw this away in another year because I've already had it for a year? It's because I'm going to want the hot new version, right? With all the same with the iPhones that are already coming out with the next version. The idea is we make this thing so it can be upgraded in the field even while it's running. The whole, we'll do the best we can to make it be the hot new version for as many years as possible.
Every year you can download all the new stuff.
To get real, if you really want to get real, this is what you have to. If you want to change the world, this is what it takes.
It has to be sustainable.
Where's the police? It's a weird. Oh, well.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Just so I'm clear on what it is you're looking for. Are you interested in selling $12,000 units, or are you interested in investors in the company?
We are. Now I'm going to get to that point in a minute.
Okay.
All of the above.
Okay.
Basically, we have another company that does some beta some initial systems here in Costa Rica, and we're interested in doing that. But that is, a small piece of what this is. This is a global market. We have a global market of over $250 billion that we have unique potential for, and we are absolutely bringing on investors. I'll get into that investor part of it in just a minute. So I'll just kind of cruise with this, and I'll actually address that better.
Perfect.
Shortly. Now, you saw that system and kind of understood what it was, and this looks like just four of the same system. And so what this would give you, it's like four houses that are living near each other. Let's say they don't have the grid, and they get a 6,000 watt digital generator. I can send you guys papers that explain this more fully. But the whole idea is that generator isn't big enough to run these things. So all these guys can run without the generator by themselves for their critical loads. But when the generator runs, they all synchronize to it, and they all have the capability to put energy in or take it out. So some are putting it in, some are taking it out, and what it does is it allows these four houses to share energy. Let's say this guy isn't using much energy right now. Maybe he's not even home. All his resources can be shared with the other three houses. In fact, they can even do accounting on it, to financially compensate each other for this. So this is what's called a microgrid. It's like the grid they use this, the grid for Costa Rica is just a very small grid. It's only 4 houses. And you can make microgrids of any size you want. You can have that neighborhood could be a microgrid, and it could actually be economic to where the whole neighborhood, now you have maybe 50 houses, and they're sharing energy. That's a real possibility. And in fact, the United States government is very interested in microgrids because they're interested in homeland security, that whole thing. And so when things go down, they would like to see as much of the country or neighborhoods or businesses functional as possible because it costs them. You have a Hurricane Sandy comes in, and all these people have energy emergencies because nothing works, and that costs the government lots of money. If they have a system like this, it becomes an energy inconvenience. So nobody doesn't pay anything for an energy inconvenience, right? They just let the people be inconvenienced. One of the samples is the United States government just honored, put out a $1.7 million microgrid demonstration grant that's being put together at Camp Pendleton, the big Marine base near San Diego. And it's all based on the Transverter. It's all, it'll all be our stuff. We're working directly with those people. In fact, now they've gotten so excited, they're thinking about actually investing in the company. So then you see, just like your answer, there's 2 things. They started out they needed the product. They found out about our products and actually started buying them. And now they're so excited, they say, hey, we can scale this up. This could be a major deal. So
we've had a lot of that kind of investment. We haven't done venture capital investment, but we've had people interested. We haven't done it because they have protocols and time limits. And this is something that we've developed over 15 years and something that's taken the grid people a while to realize that we had a solution to a problem that we're just starting to form. Okay? Because he started the market, and so he was ready. So it's taken them a while. So we've held on to it and just done private investment so that nobody could shut us down or manipulate the company, because we have a real vision about making solar sustainable on the planet, right? And so holding on to that, we've taken on small amounts. Like these people, they're full on doing it. It'll take them 6 months to decide to invest in us, because that's how they work, right? It's a big government contract kind of place.
Well, I'm just going to try to get one more kind of scientific concept across, and then we'll get into the investment financial end of it. But just as another example of how the world has changed. When they designed the grid, it was designed for the world of the 50s. Well, the world of the 50s had incandescent light bulbs and inductive motors and electric heating elements, basically. Now, we have electronics. We have computers. We have compact fluorescent lights or high-frequency electronic light valves. In other words, these are all these lights are electronic loads. And now, Costa Rica has over 20% of their loads are electronic here. And that's growing. Well, what's the difference? The resistive load, like this red line, if you lower the voltage, it lowers the current. But an electronic load, they're smart. And so if you lower the voltage, they automatically increase the current. Well, the reason the voltage is lowered is because the grid or the generator has reached capacity, and then increasing the current is just going to make it worse. So what happens is, with the old world, if it ever topped out and the grid, their loads exceeded the grid, the voltage would just dip a little bit. The light bulbs would dim. You probably remember seeing it. The lights dim when a big motor starts, and then they get bright again. But now, with electronic loads, if it ever touches that line, it guarantees that the grid completely collapses. Or it could be your generator on a small home with a generator, right? So the whole idea is they can't risk that. So they have to run at a smaller percentage of their rated load, they call that spinning capacity, or else they have to start peaker plants so that they can't risk bumping that, because it absolutely will crash them. And we're moving towards 80% electronic loads. Apple has a new data center that has 175 megawatt electronic load. That's a continuous draw. So there's more and more stuff of the way how we can do this electronically and make it all work. Basically, how do we make the big picture work? And if you want, we can pursue it after we go through the other stuff. We can go back to that, or we can talk again later, emails or whatever. This is one of our systems in San Francisco that has 14 kilowatt hours of lithium-ion batteries, and it's basically playing the game of selling and buying electricity. Anything. If you're about that concept of buying and selling stock or real estate, when it's cheap you buy it, when it's expensive you sell it, and you make money on that, right? Well, the same thing with electricity. They have places where the market flows, even within the day. And 4 o'clock in the afternoon, electricity is very expensive. At 3 o'clock in the morning, it's very cheap. If you can buy it one time of the day and sell it the other time, you can make a business. That's what that's doing.
That's what that's doing in California.
Now there's another kind of business which isn't really available here yet, but it will be. And these are what's called ancillary services. When the grid has these problems, it has people that have signed up for demand response, so that they've agreed that if the grid calls them up or communicates and says at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, man, we got a problem, could you cut off your big load? So some factory will cut off, some 50 kilowatt load, and then 2 hours later, it's okay, it's back to normal, they turn it back on, and the factory can tolerate that. The factory gets paid money for that. That's demand response. There's other ones, frequency stabilization, power factor compensation, but they'll only let you play the game if you're over 100 kilowatts or so. So nobody's house is big enough. But we've built the communications into this to where you as a developer, let's say you're a developer, you don't just sell lots and make a neighborhood, you actually include the electrical system and you monitor this. And so you can report to the grid company with these 100 houses like it's one entity, and it does qualify. And so then you get a big fat check for the ancillary services, and you can either you put some of it in your pocket and you spread it out amongst other people that have their systems here. That's a very big deal. That's actually worth as much money as all the solar electricity that these systems are producing. So ancillary services, so you don't think about it so much the reality for here in Costa Rica yet, but in Europe and the United States, it's in Canada, it's very much a reality today. So from an investment standpoint, it's a very real part of this. And we're the only one that does this. We make our ancillary services available literally hundreds of times faster than anything else in the market, because it's all electronic and it's small and it's local. When you're turning something big on, like imagine BF Goodrich tire factory, some big piece of equipment there, it's slow to get that kind of response. This is in Costa Rica. Now, Costa Rica is a special country. We have over 90% of our electricity is renewable. And we're trying to be the first country to be carbon neutral by 2020 or something like that, right? And so we're patting each other, we're putting solar in, we're putting more wind generators in. Why in the hell would they install a $360 million peaker plant running on bunker oil in Punta Arenas? They did this. They spent that money. Not only did they spend the money, they compromised the whole country, of course, getting loans for the money. And you know how that works, right? So for that same amount of money, we could have put this into 31,000 houses. And it would have been 100 times faster. And it would have included 57 megawatts of solar. And it would have had smart demand response that could have saved them 249 megawatt hours a day. And that combined with the solar would produce 183 gigawatt hours of clean green energy a year. And like I said, the secondary response time is 17 milliseconds instead of 4 minutes. That's the same amount of money. We just have to get through them. Not only that, you have 31,000 houses that when the grid went down, the lights would stay on. That's a pretty extreme comparison. Here's another comparison. This is in the United States. The typical peaker plant's about 50 megawatts. So we go in there and we do it in 6,478 houses. Same installation cost. They're spending the same $75 million. Here they're going to have a total running cost of $2.25 million a year just to run this thing. Peaker plants generally run at less than 10% of their rating. In other words, they're just running so they're ready in case you need it. It's the most wasteful thing you can imagine. And so here, we're actually producing $3.85 million of green energy revenue a year. That's for the same $75 million investment. And they have to install these things because of all this solar and wind that's going on in the States. This is a major thing. That's a real value proposition.
So they're realizing they can come in with residential solar. Someone like Solar City can come in and offer you a financial package to put this solar on your roof. They can do the whole neighborhood. They can spend the money, get the people to pay half of it, and they get the benefit and didn't have to put in the peaker plant.
But only if you do it with
same
this kind of equipment that's smarter. So from a financial standpoint, we have a real advantage. You know, you talk about differentials. So you're saying, okay, it's going to be competition. This company or this company. Why is your company going to be so special? This is why. There's no other company that can offer that kind of a value proposition. There's no other company that's even thinking about it at this level.
We're starting.
I'm going to skip through some of these market things. We can go back over any of this. We still want to.
We've done.
I want to get to some of the
three companies.
We can spend as much time as you guys want, but you might not want to stay here till 10, right? I can easily do it. And we can keep it interesting. But we're going to skip around so we get to some of the stuff you do care about. These breaks our markets. The same product, the same box, fills these four basic market categories. These are in millions of dollars. This is the world potential market right now. This is the market that's happening already. If we do nothing, they're going to sell this, they're going to hit these numbers. This is what the world is doing. If you take into account all the juicy new features of this, the market will be much, much bigger. But this is pretty big. $288 billion in 2016 is a significant market, right? And so we're projecting, so we can do financial projections for the company. Of course, we have to project something. These are how much we're planning on selling, forecasting that we'll sell in those years. So here's
We can send it
an important slide.
sheet that
Yeah, basically, yeah, we have full business plans and everything, so we can provide you with all the details you could possibly want. But just to give you a quick snapshot, we've taken on $7.2 million to get where we are now. We're raising $1.2 million right now by selling stock. All of this money we've raised, all of our stock are common shares. There are no preferred shares. There's no Series A, Series B. The stock that I own in this company would be exactly the same rights and everything as the stock that you would own if you invested. We're selling stock at $3 a share. About the last $1 million of stock that we've sold, a little more than that actually, has been sold at that price. You know, of course, it's been going up over time. After the 1.2 million raised, then we'll probably raise it to $4 a share. We do have the capability to raise, to increase that to as much as 5 million, but there'd be tiered thing with the share price. If you look at the amount of shares outstanding, 9 million shares, that's basically giving you a pre-money valuation of $28 million. In other words, if you were to invest in this, you're saying to yourself, this company is worth at least $28 million. So the whole idea is, these are our projected sales, and this is how it comes out of the profit and loss. Basically, this company is designed so that we can make money selling the hardware, even though half the value is the software. See, the real threat to a juicy software company is how you protect your castle. You know, somebody else can copy your software, and you make a lot of profit on your software until somebody steals your show, right? With hardware, people get beat up for price, but it's a hardware thing. So it's the profits, you have a good gross operating margin, it's more solid. So we're a combination of the two. And it allows us to basically defend the castle. We can have a 51, about a 50% gross margin that we can maintain. And we can scale the company up regardless of how big we get. We can maintain that and still have good operating budgets for selling expenses and administration expenses. The key thing is, what do you get out of your investment? Your investment, within a few years, will have the capability, and if I show you the whole business plan, you'll see we're projecting generating enough cash where you could get your whole investment back, probably twice a year, just from dividends. But the juicier thing is basically if we either go public or there's an acquisition. If you either go public or there's an acquisition, it would have the value generally based on earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, referred to as EBITDA, generally in the investment world. All the companies in the United States today are trading for about 7 times EBITDA. So if you value our company at 7 times our projected EBITDA, then you would get 14 times what you put into the company in 2016, which is an internal rate of return of 161%, which is obviously a great investment if you believe it. So the question is, what can we do to help you believe it? And so if you're interested, or your friends are interested in moving forward, then we would provide you with a non-disclosure agreement, which basically just says you'll keep the confidential information confidential. And then we send you, about 50 pages of documents. We give you full business plan, spreadsheets, projections, all kinds of technical documents, and then we entertain further discussions.
Do you have a Reader's Digest condensed version?
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
We did. That's how we start. We start with that whole elevator pitch concept. So we have a thing that's just like a short email, and then it has several page attachment. And then if you like that, there's another tab that's a little bit bigger. And then if you like that, then you get the full thing. Like, for instance, you might be the guy who signs the check, but you might have a financial advisor that wants to go through the fine detail, with due diligence, all that kind of stuff. So yes, that's absolutely available. If you're investing from the United States, then we would also provide you with a private placement memorandum, because we're not a publicly traded company. Go to the SEC in the United States, there's provisions that we can raise money as long as we dance their dance and take money from qualified investors and get you to sign a private placement memorandum. Quite a few of our investors are from the United States. Quite a few are from people that are maybe from the United States, but they have property in Costa Rica, they're involved here. So the whole idea is you can make a substantial amount of money either from dividends or from some sort of a liquid, making your investment more liquid, which we do plan on doing. The most likely thing would be going public. And so that you kind of get your cake and eat it too. You continue to do the company, and then you've got each individual shareholder, they sell what they want when they want. But it's also really doing something significant in the world. This is something that is a major project. It's probably one of the more major projects that could be out there. This could be well in excess of the $288 billion that we're doing. So this runs us into a whole other problem. If I have 16, you're going to say, well, that's real aggressive. And it's true, it is. But then when you look at the unique technical structure of the market and then our history, because we created the market, And you realize that the world, we can put a fairly small amount of these out there, and the world could come to our doorstep and demand that we start producing several $1 billion a year, which obviously doesn't fit this business plan. At that point, there'll be large raises, there'll be more significant things, there'll be affiliations with other strategic partners. That's already people that are talking, very interested. I've already talked with the president of General Electric Power, for instance. They would be interested. Emerson Electric would be interested. Schneider, of course, they're interested. Their whole head of R&D just asked if he could join our company. And they bought several of my other companies. Everything they make in the inverter industry, I designed. So these are big entity, high multi-billion-dollar companies that would be very interested in getting involved. Doesn't mean we'll do it with them, but we might. Because all those potentials are there. But if what's going to happen with this 1.2 million, when we're talking about this mammoth thing that we could tackle, that's of interest to you. So with this 1.2 million, if that's just that amount of money, what we did is we finished our listings so that we can be installed in all mass things like the European, the Japanese, JTEX, UL for the United States, CSA for Canada. We're almost done with CSA for Canada and UL for the United States. We only have a couple more days of testing left. No one's ever made a piece of equipment that does so many things, so there's more things to test. But we're almost finished with that. But then we'll ramp up production, so we start doing mostly pilot projects. Like there'll be a project with San Diego Gas and Electric where they have 200-house project. But these things will become very high profile. Like Camp Pendleton with their microgrid. The head of Camp Pendleton has already said, hey, if he likes this demonstration project, he'll convert the whole camp. And if he converts the whole camp, there's 35 other military bases in the United States that will follow right on his heels. So any one of these, we already have a pipeline generated, a sales pipeline generated. We have customers that would exceed $1.6 million of sales as soon as we have our UL listing finished. And most of those companies, by themselves, could fulfill this entire business plan. So it's obviously a real issue. And so with this 1.2 million, it'll push us to that point where there's enough highly visible, demonstrable places out there, and then we have another generation of product that will be developed and released with that, which is our, instead of a 2 kilowatt power module, it's an 18 kilowatt power module. You can put them together in sets of 3 for 54 kilowatts, so it's a more serious commercial product, but there's a tremendous demand for it already, and it becomes a level 3 electric vehicle charger right out of the box, which you can take your Tesla sedan, plug it into it, and not only can it charge the battery in 20 minutes, but it can use the battery to power your office, and so, or to stabilize the grid. And so that is the key to changing the energy, the transportation structure, because there's electric vehicles out there. People think they're cool, but it's a small percentage of what's happening. What's going to take to get that really off the ground is more participation. And so the way to get participation is get the grid to care about it. The grid realizes that in order to take renewable energy in, they have to have energy storage. And most cars are parked most of the time. Like all your cars are parked right now, right? Those cars were electric vehicles. If they were plugged in, they could not only be keeping their batteries charged and maintained, but as the grid's having hiccups and stuff, because of renewable energy, your car could be helping stabilize it enough to where the grid company would be helping pay for your car, which means that you would have bought that car instead of another one because the incentive is so great. So the days, we're trying to work past the days of government incentives to real incentives. It really makes financial sense. And it's not just because it's cool and somebody, congressmen voted on this, they didn't even understand what it was they were voting on. This is actual real business world, solid value proposition stuff.
Competition? Can you talk about people that are competing with you?
I can. The key competitors, actually, we have. My glasses on. So
I'm just cheating to sound smart.
I wonder if that's the same.
if you talk about these, interesting, the screen is cutting part of it off. But anyway, these different markets, these are features that are unique to the transverter. So different markets care about more of these features. So they're sweeter markets for us. And the smart grid, in particular, and the cell tower market, there's really no competition yet. But I don't pretend for a moment there won't be. The big companies, you know, Siemens, Schneider, all those people will do their best to follow, but they'll be a step behind.
Do you hold certain patents that will...
We have very strong patents, but what's more...
Can they redevelop the crucial technology in
the
different ways to get
hardware,
around
very
it?
strong. Have you dealt with patents very much?
No.
Well, we have a really strong, we have one of the strongest IP firms in the world, Baker & Botts. They have offices in every major city on the planet.
Okay.
And our general philosophy is, like a patent, the first part of it just kind of talks about the device, but the real legal part are the claims. And so the idea is you real aggressive and make all these claims, and you expect to fight with the patent examiners for a couple of years and limp away with half your claims. That's a good patent. That's how that world works. To give you an idea of how unique this is, we were applying to patent the topology, the way the big things hook together, and we had 110 claims. Our patent application was like a book. The first response from the U.S. Patent Office, which is the biggest patent office in the world, was they accepted all of our claims with no changes. That never happens.
And now the investment would own a part of those
Absolutely.
patents. So if anything happens to the company,
Not
there's
just
still
that
value in
patent,
selling
The
it.
company owns it, you own part of the company.
Yeah.
We own
Okay.
everything, we
It's
don't
amazing.
owe nobody's got anything on it.
And we've had, believe me, there's people, even shareholders, that say, well, why don't we do some special thing with the IP? We won't do that.
Okay.
So, not just this patent, but future patents. We have a whole bunch of other patents that are pending, that are in process, right? Those patents
Will go into this company.
Legally by this company.
Not just the company, but well, there's two ways to go on it. One thing is this other part of defending the castle. One way is to defend it with patents. Another good thing about patents is it's easier to get conventional financing. You go to the bank and they say this and this and say, oh yeah, we have these patents. They like to see that.
Right.
But the other thing is the other part of our IP. The logic that's not in microcontrollers is held within the field programmable gate arrays. That's
It's a new way of doing stuff.
we use the FPGA company that's the largest in the world. It's Xilinx. I've used them from their beginning. And Xilinx has a special version called the Spartan, which was made for high-tech products going into the Chinese market because everyone's paranoid of the Chinese ripping off your technology. So far, it's been bulletproof. So far, no one has broken through. And so the strongest thing we actually have is you can't reverse engineer it. And so and not like that, it's always changing because we're always improving our project in that logic. But you can't just buy our product and figure out what's in that. So that's owned, so the shareholders own that. And we will at sometimes probably license some of it to the electric vehicle industry, to other industries, where we expand out. We might make some sub-modules or parts like that.
Okay.
Our biggest thing to competition is right now, everybody in the inverter world is doing it the way we did it 30 years ago.
So far
When we
beyond.
started, the patents that we had then that we've sold that other companies now own, our names on it, right?
Right.
But they use it because they own it, right? Was heading in a direction, okay? Now, whether it's Sunny Boy, whether it's Xantrax, these are our competition. Whoever they are, they're all going in that direction.
The wrong
And as
direction.
things change, they're adding on. They're going, oh, this could be improved. They're adding on in the same way. When we started this project, this is a whole different thing. This isn't an add-on. This is a whole new direction and way to do it that has nothing to do with how they're heading, right?
Okay.
And so now that we've come along, they're catching on and they're adding on some things, but it's not.
Doesn't come close.
It's not going to come close, and they're going to have to redesign and go in a whole new direction.
In fact,
It's not a natural thing.
these are the ones that I consider the closest. These are the highest quality. I recommend highly buying any of these products. They're all quality products. In fact, I'm friends with a lot of the people in those companies. I like those people. I want good things for those companies. You know, part of our whole idea is to replace the word competition with cooperation. Some of those people will end up coming to work for our company. Outback was started by some engineers for a company that I started, Trace, that went across the street. SMA copied the stuff from our original stuff. Fronius, these are all high quality things. These are very high value features that I've been talking about that give us this approach to the market. These are which features these companies have.
And what went wrong?
They don't have any of those.
What went wrong with those companies was nothing except that they were making good money. Everybody was getting paid and they were heading in a direction and it was making money. The fact that it isn't sustainable, the fact that it isn't going to work, doesn't mean it doesn't make money today. It's just that they can't continue to do it, and now they're trying to make as much as they can because
right now, before it's not going to last.
It's
not going to work.
Because a lot of people have a business and they want it to make money, they want it to be profitable, and that's their main motivation, right? Even if they have this green flag waving. We are not that situation. Our criteria is that it has to change the world. It has to make solar infinitely scalable. It has to address these glaring ecological issues that the planet is facing. And it turns out that that will be the biggest market so far, so it'll actually be the most lucrative. So it's kind of ironic in a way that the ones that actually are holding the big vision will have it. There's another market I haven't talked about so much. Has to do with actually part of the technology.
Yeah, this isn't a better mousetrap. This isn't a better inverter. This isn't. That's how it's going. We wouldn't have got back into the industry. We were done.
Right.
We sold, we retired, we created something that was super nice. We started the solar market. Realizing it wasn't good enough, we started to do something else, right? If we didn't think that we could make a significant difference and make solar happen on the planet and maybe not do so much nuclear and coal, we wouldn't have gotten back.
We'd just hang out on,
we'd surf.
They've got a beautiful place.
Yeah, we'd do something else if we didn't think this could be significant, that we could really do something, right? And Hart said, I can do this.
Here's another key feature to the product, right? Just jumping back. This is off the patent documentation. See, this could be, these are DC sources. That could be solar, that could be batteries. It could be any voltage, any technology, any chemistry, and then it does all this stuff. But it has this 50-volt DC rail, and on the power module there's a big yellow terminal, and that's how energy gets carried from one power module to the next. So you can say you had 3 power modules, and you had real strong solar here, but all your heavy load was on this one. Through that 50-volt rail, all power modules have use of everything in there. Well, it just so happens the 50-volt rail is the 48-volt DC telecom standard. So every piece of telecom equipment on the planet runs on that. That means everything in every cell tower that you see is running on that. So this becomes the ideal cell tower power supply. The cell tower has to buy power supplies to take the grid and turn it into 48-volt DC. This does that. But it also integrates solar, it also does all this other stuff. So now, and there's an enormous number of cell towers on the planet that don't even have the grid. And so what their cost of electricity is somebody driving a truck down a bad road to deliver diesel fuel once a week. And so we're way beyond
cell tower
there. And this is an enormous market, an immediate market of over $20 billion a year. And you know the cell towers are, I don't know how many you have around here, but from our beach where we stand and look out, remember when the first cell tower went out? How many did we count the other night?
9.
9 cell towers. It was at night. You could see the lights coming on, right? It was like and every one of those would save money on their installation cost and save money on their monthly operating cost if they had it run on a transfer. So this is a very big issue. Now we have an issue that we just did a quote for Jamaica. Actually, the government helped support it. It's like $118 million quote we gave them to do a complex of cell towers.
So I have a question, and I want to preface it by saying that I love the idea and definitely want to know more. And the question is, if you guys have all this and the contacts that you obviously have, why presentations in a group this size?
Because Nathan said you guys were interested.
Okay.
That's all it took. And we were up here, and he said, Nathan's been super interested and supportive.
I've been
And
involved
he
for like
said-
5 years now, 6 years.
Nathan's a shareholder.
He said,
He took money out of
he said
his pocket.
when we were up here doing this anyway, and he said we have people that would be interested. Do you want to talk? And we always say yes.
Another issue is when you work hard, like we do. You can't hardly imagine how hard we work on this, and the team that's working on this. There's going to be a lot of people that make a lot of money on this, both within the company, shareholders of the company, but also companies that interact with our company, and that's the way it goes. But if some of those people, if you can have a higher expectation that some of those people might do good things with their money, you can't control it, but you're more motivated to have them do it. And so, even though I don't know you very well,
Nathan says
I have, a higher expectation of what you would do with the money you made from this than what Kleiner Perkins would do with the money they made from it. And that might be unfair, it might even be unrealistic, but nevertheless, it's part of it. This is it's a very real project.
You know everybody that's invested.
Good friends, yeah.
Now, a lot of the people that are invested are involved in the industry or involved in technology, they care about it. Some of the people have started some of the big renewable energy distributors in the United States. Some of them have personally bought shares and stuff like that. Some people involved in the telecom industry, they've bought shares, because they can.
Here's something that's interesting. Let me show this. When we started doing this and realized that we would try to hook into the grid in the United States, there's a grid company that handles most of the software that connects that the utilities use to deal with their clients in the field. And it's a company called OSI Soft. You can look them up. It's a publicly traded company. Anyway, OSI Soft, when they realized, we went to a show and we were talking just like we were talking to you, and the guy was next to us.
The Smart Grid Show.
The Smart Grid Show. We're talking about Smart Grid. And he listened to us long enough, both of us do it back and forth, and they got involved. Now, this is the biggest software company for grids in the United States. They sent several guys down to our lab at their expense, and they loaded all of their stuff onto our transverter, so that any place that we go to be part of the smart grid, we're already with the same software as the grid company has. They did that for free, and several of the main people in that grid company have invested because they realize that as this goes on, this is just that's how investment happens for us. These people
almost all the grid companies in the United States have their data on the Pi server. They just came to Costa Rica, maybe EC might do it. EPM in Colombia is on it. They're expanding all over the world. They have all of the ISOs in the United States, and you might not even know it. Those are independent systems.
If people do it with us, our software on the and so they've all invested. They were our last round of investment. It was these OSI Soft people that do the software for the grid companies to connect solar.
Just look at a neighbor. You guys have experience in developing around here. So if you tried to break your real estate stuff up into kind of blocks, maybe not exactly a neighborhood, a project, how many homes would you say would be in that block? Just a way to put it into numbers.
I would say 50.
Okay, so you had 50 homes. Let's say we had a solar installation with the transfer, like the one we put on the day. This had an average cost of $20,000. Now, fairly realistic. That's what I would probably expect here. Well, 50 times 20,000 is $1 million. That's $1 million of business. That's not all transfer business. That includes the solar panels, the insulation, the batteries, everything. But still, those 50 houses would have had, a couple $100,000 of transfer business. And that's a fairly small piece of the world market of houses that you might call in the category of profile of that, that demographic of customer, that amount, size of wallet, that kind of, what they care about with the green. Think about the marketability of it. You've got these houses. In spite of these people even wanting to buy a house here in Costa Rica, right? It's inconvenient, the infrastructure isn't good, they like the nature. They might want to surf, they like green stuff, they might be into yoga. They care about all the psychologicals. They genuinely care about it. They also care about security. Maybe they're afraid of living in Europe or the United States, the way things are going. So this gives them a lot more valuable, both from bragging rights and real stuff, the way of real living. And the whole idea of the critical load and the non-critical load is our civilization has no choice but to change. It's not sustainable. Not sustainable means it will change. It's just a question of how uncomfortable it's going to be. So when all of a sudden you put things on a platter where you've got the critical loads and the non-critical loads, and if you add more solar, then you can take a couple of these loads and put them over here, then automatically you've created a highway. You've created a smooth transition. They can either put some money there, or they can change their philosophy and their lifestyle, either one, or a combination of them, and they will. It provides an ecological pathway, a transition pathway, where they can either spend more money, augment their system, or clean up their life. And, for instance, air conditioning. Can you live here without air conditioning? Of course you can live without air conditioning. Are you going to? Well, it depends on all these things. In Florida, half of the energy consumed is for air conditioners.
How big is your team?
What?
How big is your team? Your company?
Right now, it's small. We have about 16 people working at the factory. And then we've got a couple people in the United States, and then an engineering, sales team, some stuff like that. But we have quite a few people that are involved that aren't employees. There's people that are working they're basically customers, but they're actually writing software. We give people, if they want it, what's called an API. And that is a bunch of software code that they can plug into their software, and they can automatically communicate and control our equipment. So it makes other people's developers. So we have quite a few of those out there, including some people with OCSoft, that are really very active, valuable parts of our team that they're not on our payroll yet. Part of why we're raising money is so we
spread the team.
Can have more people on our payroll. Including you guys. I don't know what you guys' background or whatever. You or your friends. We're really into developing stuff like that. I mean, as this grows, there's going to be lots of people needed. Particularly people that are good at sales, good at technology, good at programming.
I was going to go on the internet and check this out. Besides our webpage, I checked out residential solar. Just kind of Google residential solar and see what's happening, see who the players are, what the issues are. What you have is you have all over the country right now these groups getting together, homeowners saying, you know what, we want to do solar. We're buying electricity, we want part of our thing to be solar. So we're going to want to do this, and then the government says, the utility says, no, you can't do it right now. We'll do a study. Okay, months goes by, and so there's being actually big political battles in almost every state right now of residential solar that wants to go in. People want to be able to do it, and the government's saying, no, not right now, we're going to hold off, we're going to do another study. Some places, Arizona right now, they're doing it, and Arizona wants to charge the people that are connected to solar more than the people that don't have solar. And the people, of course, think it's because they don't want solar. The truth is they just want solar to pay for itself because it isn't sustainable, and the utility companies are paying for it. And it was kind of cute at first, but now it's not. And they can't just have 80 out of 100 houses. You can't have 80 of them be solar, or it takes over.
And this sentiment is very real, and some of them are very significant affluent areas. For instance, Marin County in California was so strong that they kicked the grid company out and became their own grid company.
Because they want to have solar.
So did Sacramento, which is a significant city. Boulder just recently did it. And part of Boulder's thing actually had to do with some of the, I've been helping support their fight there. You know, they're successfully weaning themselves from Excel. They're going to be on their own counterpart.
And they're just saying, get your listings and we'll put you guys in and we'll see. And that's what we need. We need to get our listings, and we need to have some demonstrations of 100 houses here. And we have big companies like San Diego Gas and Electric, Helco from Hawaii. They're ready. They have the projects.
Is there any way that you would not get the listings? It seems like a lot is hedged on that. Is there something that could happen that would stop that process?
Well, there was. Further back in time, it would have been, you would have said that, but I just recently, I've actually personally gone when they do this testing up in New York, the laboratory, and I've gone 5 trips. I've done 5 trips, and the last trip I spent 4 weeks, and I worked 7. I even got the test on a Saturday, only one of the Saturdays, but, and worked through all the problems. And so we've actually tested every single function and passed every single function. It's the only things that have to be tested now are some things that have to be repeated because they have to be tested all on the same actual unit. There's a certain group of tests. And so that's only like 2 or 3 days of testing, but it's stuff that we've already tested and passed, right? So I'm not worried about that.
We don't feel there's question marks to finish this testing.
And then that test, that group of tests gives us UL and CSA. CSA is for Canada. And then from that, we can move on to Europe for the European, CE. But that will be fairly easy because it's still based on a lot of the same standards. And the same exact unit we make is already usable in Japan. And the next one we'll get is JTEX, which is the listing for Japan. And Japan, of course, has an enormous need right now. They're under tremendous pressure because they're between a rock and a hard place. They want things to be clean. They don't want global warming, but they don't want nuclear, and somehow they still want electricity. And they got a real issue there.
Plus, when they had that whole meltdown, there was a lot of rooftop solar that just was there that they couldn't get to. You realize that how solar is being hooked up today, that if the power goes down, even if you have solar on your roof, you can't use it. That's how
Shuts
it
down
is.
with
A
it.
whole group of people.
That's why
lots
us
of
saying
people
you can have backup. It's
in
super
New
different.
Jersey and Connecticut and New York had $30,000 solar installations on their home, and Sandy came through, and they were livid when they realized that they didn't have any electricity.
That $30,000.
No, they were actually told they just
So
need
their power went out.
fine
Big
print.
went out.
Because the way they hook it up, you can't get to it. It
can't
belongs
do
to all
Can't do
rooftop solar goes into the grid, and it's not yours. And you can't.
Oh, in the
use it.
States, that's how it works. So it doesn't
That's
go into
how it works
batteries.
everywhere. Yeah, they don't. They aren't.
They
doing
think
it.
they're independent and they're not.
So they didn't
think
have
they're
batteries.
independent.
Or
They
they
didn't
do.
have batteries because batteries,
battery
they're not free. You got to put them somewhere. You just have to put them in
No,
the
they
home.
didn't have
They can do the grid tie solar all on the outside, so it's more invasive.
So they just do solar and
you
inverter.
replace after a while, so it's all these negative
Screw.
features to the batteries, and so they make the deal with sweet. They didn't need the batteries for the government incentives because the government incentives were put together by politicians that didn't actually know the science behind what they were doing. And one big
Japan too.
so it's a great
Japan that
company.
melted down, and they had thousands of houses that had solar.
I lived in Japan and there's a lot of houses with solar already, but they're not independent.
So when the power went down, all those panels were useless.
Just sitting there. And
So that's a unique difference with ours.
And there's actually
That you
people
always
installing
have-
solar in Costa Rica, floating on systems in Nosara to do grid tie solar. And they can do it, and it will work, and it will reduce your electric bill. But it only works when the grid is working, number one. And number two, it requires things like a Garavito picker plant to balance it out.
What's the time frame on the UL and Canadian approval?
That's all. It's being tested all as one of the things, so it's exactly the same time. Actually, as soon as we just raise us a little bit more money, then I will be scheduling the next date. It will probably be within 2 or 3 weeks.
Probably within a month.
So we'd be done within 2 or 3 weeks.
And once that is approved and you have that, then you can begin selling in the U.S. That's
exactly. We can sell some to the U.S. now, but not big time. People can't, like Solar City won't buy them and put them in homes.
And we have sold some, and they're saying, okay, let's open the floodgates. We'd like to take 100. When will the UL listing be there?
You know, a lot of people that have bought them are people that are developing new batteries. You know, there's a real tremendous push right now to develop new batteries because they need them for electric vehicles. And we can tell when somebody comes out with a new chemistry because our programs. Because when you come with a new chemistry of battery, what's your market on day zero? It's nothing. Like a couple years ago, we all had these things with nickel metal hydride batteries in them, right? They came out with lithium ion. How many of us went out and got lithium ion batteries and put them on our nickel metal hydride computers? Nobody, right? Threw our computers away and bought new ones. Well, that's a tremendous barrier to technology, to implementing new technology. But with the transverter, you just load in the new mathematical model, and bam, day zero, all the transverter installed base is ready for your product. So we've got people that have aqueous solution batteries, people with carbon nanotubes with lead batteries, we've got people with lead zinc batteries, we've got several lithium ion batteries that are all using the transverters with their product.
Did they call and say we want to test our stuff out? No, we can't run on it.
Nothing else will run on it. And so those will end up being evolving partners with us as their technology comes online. They have a preference for the transverter. They'll be key players, key strategic partners with us.
Part of what makes it different and possible is that this, when it hooks up to something, it has no agenda. When it hooks up to something, it runs a mathematical model of it and works with it. So it will hook up to things that we haven't designed in the future. And it can hook up to old things. It can hook up to batteries that are broken with some of the cells out. And it says, oh, this is what this is. I can use that. You know, might say you have to change it out in a few weeks, but it'll work with it.
That's why we break things up into smaller units. We would rather have 4 small power modules that have the solar cells broke up into 4 groups and the batteries broke up into 4 groups than to have one big unit with all of them pumped together, because it makes it more fault tolerant, and then you can massage and you can custom operate each one individually so that it's more optimized. It makes things last longer, more efficient, you get more out of them, and they're more fault tolerant. And of course, that's the big deal with cell companies, is they're all about fault tolerance. They go to ridiculous extremes.
What about maintenance or upkeep?
For electronics, there is none. And then part of the maintenance is we monitor it. And that's part of why we build so much electronic analysis into it. Imagine that you're a person that has a business that sells and installs UPS systems. Your clients are data centers, they're banks, branch banks, offices and stuff like that, and of course they want reliable power, right? And you start integrating solar with it, with the transverter, it's the whole deal. How do you run your business? These are key. We're not talking about cheap customers, these are key accounts. And so you send a technician out in a truck, once a week or a couple times a month to check out everything, right? And he has to bring his equipment, hook it up, disrupt them a little bit. And the transverter, you can have it all hooked up to a plug computer, and you can actually check it out with automatic software every half hour from the comfort of your office. And you have a full-blown 16-channel colored digital scope that's not only there, it's already hooked up. And so you can do a better job with vastly less operating costs. And so that's part of the maintenance, preemptive. In other words, you'll be looking at the data logs. Not you, probably the customer, not the bank branch, people working in the bank branch, but the guy that sold the system, that's part of what he does for a living. He's maybe even milking some of the ancillary services off of it. He's also monitoring. He's saying, the battery bank number 3, still working, but it's it's looking like it's going to start causing some problems within a few months. And so at his leisure, or maybe he says power module number 2 isn't working at all, but the other ones are filling in for it, or maybe there's a problem. But when he goes out, when he sends a technician, now the technician's bringing what he needs to resolve the problem, and the customer probably doesn't even know the problem exists. So you can see it's elevating the thing. So those are the kind of maintenance we're talking about. Of course, when you're doing that, you automatically make sure you put in upgrades and updates and all that kind of stuff. You can monitor even the solar panels. You can tell there's some leaks on the solar panel. You can say, hey, it's like array number 3. Isn't keeping up with the other 3. What's the story here? And then when you question of your neighborhood with 50 houses, it's the same thing. If you're monitoring those 50 houses, you can say, 48 of those houses are, pumping along good, but these 2 houses are, why aren't they the same as the others? You have that comparison. So, and that's the kind of maintenance we're thinking. The things can break, everything in the world can break, in which case, right now, we just swap units. But what will eventually happen is there'll be authorized service centers. I've done this before with the market, because I've developed the market. There'll be authorized service centers scattered all over the world, and people that do that parts, in stock and know how to deal with it. But they show up at the site with a complete analysis already done. So they already know what they're needing, what they're doing, so you minimize the cost. Anyone that tells you there's going to be no failure, no maintenance, no warranty or anything, that is just flat out lying. The worldwide solar market is actually having a 5% failure rate per year. That's all of the best brands, of all the sizes, of all the high-profile systems. And they don't like to tell you that, but it's the truth. So we can't tell you statistically yet what it could be, but we're doing everything we can, and that's part of why we analyze things so much. So as we have failures and things happen, then we have something real that we can sink our teeth into, because the goal is, of course, is to have as little of that as possible.